Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back again in our series on HAMKA's Falsafah Hidup, or the philosophy of life. We are now basically entering into chapter 5 of the book, and we have just 4 more chapters to go. We've gone through a whole journey talking about akal, the intellect, and then we talk about undang-undang dan budi, and of course we talked about the importance of adab in the last session. Today what we want to do is to talk about moderation. I just want to say that my co-pilot Hamid is not here today. He's a bit unwell, but we have to push on and pray that he will get well soon. Now this chapter is very interesting because Hamka talks about the importance of being moderate. Why in the lives of many people that we see, their lives is filled with extremism and doing things beyond what is necessary. In the book Falsafah Hidup, this chapter to me is the most so-called organized chapter, where he is very formulaic about what he's trying to say. Now, moderation, as we know, is an important aspect of Islam. Islam is a middle religion, and is a religion that promotes moderation. And this is why when we read Hamka, we are reminded of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Khairul umuri awsatuha," where he says the best of matters is to take the middle course. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is trying to tell us that in anything that we do, we must always be balanced, we must always be moderate. And Hamka says this in page 171. He begins the whole chapter on moderation with these very, very insightful lines. He says, orang yang sederhana, yang tidak terlalu condong dan tidak terlalu rebah. So he tries to define that one who is moderate is not one who is always giving in, condong, and who is not one who's always very rigid. And he goes on to say, syahwat yang dibolehkan syarak sekalipun tidak melebihi mesti ketika mengambil kesempatan daripada keharusan itu. Misalnya, boleh memakan makanan yang enak, mentang-mentang harus boleh, tidaklah dilahapnya lebih daripada kekuatan perutnya. So he tries to define moderation. So go back to the hadith that I mentioned just now, Khairul umuri awsatuha, that moderation means that one must find the mean or the median between being too excessive and between deprivation. That means you deprive yourself of something that you need. And he gives an example that is so close to our hearts, the example of eating. Now there is a problem in our community, as you all know, that obesity is very high within the Muslim community. We eat a lot. We eat sometimes more than we salat. Some people in one country that I used to stay before, they eat 6 times a day. So imagine, they eat so much that they don't seem to get tired of eating. So this is where Hamka reminds us that to be moderate is to know when to stop. To be moderate is to know that you need something. You need food to survive. You need food to live, but you don't live because of food. Kita memerlukan makanan untuk hidup, tapi kita tidak hidup untuk makan. And he gives other examples of, like he said, dibolehkan syarak beristeri 4 sampai 4, asal sahaja sanggup, adil dan mampu. Mentang-mentang mampu, diri lupa kesanggupan dan keadilan. Dia hanya ingat kepada kemampuan, lalu beristeri 2, 3 dan 4. Salah sedikit, ceraikan 1, ditinggalkan 2, ganti lagi, cari pula janda muda dan perawan yang lain. So he says that people who are excessive, people who do not know moderation, they will do all things by way of their desires. And he goes on to say that even in ibadah, sometimes we are being fooled and trapped and deceived by the shaitan. The shaitan can even make us look at something that is good to be something that is to be pushed to the extreme, towards an extreme direction. So he gives the example of people who, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of the sahabat, they said to Rasulullah, one of them said that I'm going to do my ibadah non-stop, and on and on and on. Another one say that I want to fast continuously and not stop fasting because of his love for Allah. And another one say that I'm not going to approach my wife because my wife is a distraction for me. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then answered, and HAMKA registers this, that I too fast and not fast in certain days. I too have rest for myself, and I too approach my wife. And this is actually confirmed in the Quran, in Surah At-Taghabun. So please refer, even though HAMKA doesn't talk about it, in Surah At-Taghabun, ayat number 16, Allah says, Fattakullaha mastata'tum. Be mindful of God as much as you can. Mastata'tum basically means as dedicated as you can, and do not exceed the requirement. So this is why Rasulullah SAW even say in another hadith, the religious act most pleasing to Allah is when the doer does it continuously. So in Islam, moderation is the key. It is not about doing so many things that matters. It's about doing something continuously and in a steadfast manner. In page 173, HAMKA explains this when he says, sebab nyatalah sederhana yang boleh disebut istiqamah. What is istiqamah? Istiqamah doesn't only mean to be consistent. Istiqamah in page 173, HAMKA says, ialah tegak lurus di tengah-tengah. Istiqamah means to be steadfast in the middle. Dan iktidal, sama-sama berat. Iktidal means to be balanced. Disuruh dalam ibadat sendiri yang akan mendekatkan diri kepada Allah. Apalagi di dalam pekerjaan seharian yang tidak mengenai ibadah, perkataan, perbuatan dan gerak-geri. So he says that it is not about doing something moderately, but doing something consistently in a moderate manner. And another hadith of Rasulullah SAW that confirms this, and I think I cited it also in the early chapter where Rasulullah says, Qul amantu billah thumma istaqim. Say, I believe in Allah, and then be steadfast. Hadith that is riwayat, that is narrated by Muslim. So when we talk about moderation, we are basically emphasizing on a principle that has to be applied in all areas of life. And this is where HAMKA breaks it down one by one. We will go through it one by one. But before I go through it, I just want to say that whatever that HAMKA has said many years ago in the 1950s and 60s, in fact, he mentioned in this chapter also that the book was actually written in the pre-World War II period. Now, a scholar by the name of Avram Alpert, he wrote a beautiful book, and I would encourage all the listeners to read this book. The title of the book is The Good Enough Life. It's a very interesting book published by Princeton University Press. And in the book, he criticized modern society. He says that our modern society is so obsessed with power, with materialism, with the search for name, with individualism. There is what he calls as the greatness culture. Everybody wants to be great. Nobody wants to be ordinary. Nobody wants to be normal anymore. And because we have lost the whole idea of the good enough life, we have become very excessive. Everybody wants to achieve more than what their own bodies, minds, and souls can actually adapt. And that, according to Avram Alpert, has resulted to a lot of problems in society. People who are excessively working, so much so that they don't have families. People who have families but spend so much time eating and they get sick. People who are concerned so much with power, the search for positions, and because of that, they actually become harsh and become brutal towards other people. I'm sure many of you are now in the know about this viral thing, the CEO who had an affair with another lady who is basically his HR director, and then they got caught on camera in a concert by a band. I think the band name is Coldplay. But he is an example, the way I see it, of people who, in the pursuit for power, position, materialism, desires, they forget that they have to keep themselves in check. And Hamka talks about this. Now, Hamka then breaks down moderation into many dimensions and facets. And we're going to talk about it. The first he calls sederhana, niat, dan tujuan. So at the very beginning he says, for us to be moderate, we must first have moderate intentions and moderate objectives. Now, this is very interesting because he says that people who have lofty intentions and lofty aims and objectives, they are the people who will do anything to get what they want. And that's why in page 175, on the second paragraph, he says, tak usah berniat hendak jadi raja. Tak perlu bercita-cita jadi orang berpangkat gaji besar. Akan mengharapkan bintang yang akan dihiaskan di dada. Yang perlu ialah meluruskan niat. Sebagai makhluk hidup, kita harus tegak pada garis laki-laki. Sebagai perempuan, harus menjadi ibu, menjadi saudara perempuan yang dapat mengobat hati saudara yang laki-laki. Sebagai manusia, kita harus mempunyai kemanusiaan. So he's not saying that we shouldn't dream to be something big. We shouldn't dream to do something that is significant. Every Muslim is encouraged to be the best in accordance to their ability. And this is his point, that at the end of the day, it's not only about being somebody in society, being great. At the end of the day, all of us must be achieving our fullest potential. And this is something that I always remind the young, that the purpose of life is for you to determine your race and run as fast as you can. Don't look left, don't look right. You're not competing with anyone. You are competing with yourself. And competing with yourself means that you have to have an aim in life. And that aim in life must be moderate. Must be moderate. What does it mean? That, okay, if you say, I'm going to be the most so-called successful CEO of a tech company someday. Yeah, work towards that direction. But in having that aim, do not be excessive. So much so that, oh, I don't even want to be the CEO of a very powerful tech company. I want to be the best CEO in the world, and I want to outdo every other CEO out there. That's being very excessive. And I would like everyone to read this nice article that has been published in Inc.com. The title of the article is Stop Envying the Super Productive. Extreme ambition is a form of mental illness, just as Elon Musk. It's a very beautiful article talking about, in America, there are people who are super ambitious, super so-called competitive. They go to the level of doing things that are unethical. They do things for the sake of achieving their ambition by all means necessary. And because of that, they become people that don't only injure others, do things that become problematic to other people, but they become also a liability for themselves. So that's the first, to have intentions and aims as well as objectives that is very moderate, that is achievable in accordance to your capabilities. If you are not tall like myself, don't aim to be a basketball player, right? If you think that you are not a bookish kind, still read books. You can actually do other things that are incongruent or in line with your capabilities. To be moderate means to know what you are created to do and to try and achieve as much as possible that objective. Then he goes on to talk about berfikir. So this we have talked about in the earlier sessions, the importance of akal. Even as we think about something, we must be moderate. And this is where we have now this term that has been invented called overthinking. And there are many people who are overthinkers about anything and everything. Hari ini nak pakai baju apa? They think about this for hours and hours before deciding what to wear. What should I buy for my new handphone? Research about the handphone for hours and hours. So this is a problem of people who are overthinkers. And overthinking has to do with perfectionism. People who always want things to be perfect, such that they cannot accept that certain things are not in accordance to their specifications. And these people always also suffer from the problem of OCD, right? Obsessive compulsive disorder, because they want things, they think about things in such a detailed manner, in such a way that they want things to be in a way that is done so well that they end up being very, very highly stressed. And Hamka talks about this on page 176. He says in the third paragraph in page 176, he says, satu kegilaan yang menghilangkan sederhana ialah merasa kagum pada diri sendiri. So people who overthink about things, sometimes they come to the conclusion, actually I am the best of the best. Nobody is better than me. I am proud of myself. They look at the mirror because they are perfectionists. Everything is done very, very well, whether they wear makeup or they dress themselves up. But then their thinking about themselves is actually delusional. We call it the inflated sense of the self. And he says, bongkak dengan nama keturunan sehingga lupa menyelidiki di manakah kekurangan diri. So he says, people who are extreme when thinking about things, sometimes, and they go on two spectrums, right? One, they think too highly about themselves, such that they don't think about other things. The other one, because they overthink, they think lowly about themselves. They become overcritical. So there's two spectrum there, right? People who are overcritical about themselves, people who are overcritical about others, such that they cannot see the problem in themselves. And he goes on to say that kita harus mempergunakan akal, on page 177 below, dengan saksama adalah serupa dengan olahraga juga. He says that when we think about things, we must think about things in a manner that is akin to us playing sports. When you play sports, if you push yourself too hard at the very beginning, you will get tired out in the middle of the game. So for me, like I play football, you must regulate, right, how you move. But more importantly, you must regulate your mind. You cannot be overstressed before you play sports. Because if you're overstressed, this chemical called cortisol enters into your body, and use or oversupply of cortisol actually destroys part of your bodies, and that's why some people get more injured as they play soccer or any sports than others because of the problem of overthinking. Now, the big point that he's trying to make here when it comes to moderation in thinking, and he directs it to this particular group that I mentioned just now, are the people who are arrogant, right? And we have many people now in society who's like this, right? Where people think that because they have achieved something in life, simple things like 1,000 likes on Facebook, or their videos or whatever are being shared all over. It's a reminder for people who are always in public. They think that they are special, and they think that other people are below them. And this has been reminded by by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one hadith where he say, la yadkhulul jannata man kana fi qalbihi mithqalu dharratin min kibr. Rasulullah says, whoever has an atom's weight, dharra, faman kana mithqala dharratin khairan yara. So in surah Al-Zalzalah also Allah used the word dharra. Whoever has an atom's weight of arrogance in his heart will not enter heaven. And Rasulullah says this. Now, then Rasulullah defines in the same hadith, who is these people who has the atom's weight of arrogance in their hearts? These are people who reject the truth. When people tell them, brother, I think certain things that you do need to be improved, they say, no, I know better, I've thought about it, I am the best of the best, don't tell me what to do. And Rasulullah says, arrogance is someone who always reject the truth. And more importantly, if you want to know arrogant people who overthink about themselves and overcritical of others, they always belittle other people. They look at other people in disdain, right? And this is a sickness. Kibr is a sickness that we need to be careful of. Hamka says in page 178, he says, hidup tidak lama. In the third paragraph, hidup tidak lama. Life is short. Zamannya amat pendek. Antara yang dahulu sebelum kita lahir, yang beribu tahun, dengan nanti sudah kita mati, yang beribu-ribu tahun pula. Kita singgah di dunia hanya sedetik. So he reminds us that our life is so short that to be arrogant is not something that will bring us any good. So we must be moderate when it comes to thinking. Now, in page 179, he goes on to say, on the second paragraph, ingatlah, meskipun ilmu pengetahuan amat maju dalam abad ke-20 ini, sehingga ramai orang berasa bangga dan memang patut juga dibanggakan dalam beberapa perkara, tetapi kemajuan ilmu itu belumlah menjadi jaminan untuk membuka perkara-perkara yang masih ghaib. So the problem that we have in our time is that when people exercise their reason so much, they become so arrogant that they deny the work of God on earth, the role of the divine. And this has happened to many of our young people now, right? They use their minds all the time to think about things. They forget to go back to their faith. Even old people sometimes suffer from this. They encounter problems in life and they think that they can solve the problems only through thinking or reasoning out of the problem. And we are taught in Islam, Hamka reminds us that whenever we are encountered with any situation, go back to Allah. The horizontal is as important as the vertical, right? I repeat, the horizontal is as important as the vertical. As we think about things horizontally to try and sort out our worldly problems, don't forget that you have to go back. Be moderate. Don't forget you have to go back to Allah, who will help you sort out many of the problems that you face or challenges that you face in society. So he says that people who are thinking are the most vulnerable to being extreme. And during his time, interestingly during our time too, because of the information explosion that was happening then, and even more rapid and extensive now, people think a lot too much. We think until we go to sleep. And I think young people now can relate this. Even before we go to sleep, we are always looking at our handphones. In our handphones, there's a lot of news about a lot of things. That enters into our minds. We then become affected by news that's happening in so many places in the world, be it in Gaza, Sudan, or any places in the world. We become overthinkers. And because of that, it enters into our sleep. You don't sleep well, and you wake up the next morning feeling tired and feeling depressed. And this is a problem that is faced by us. And of course, he then directs his critique to people whom, when they think in such a way that mislead people. And this, he don't direct it to the normal people. He directs it to people who are scholars, who are writers. He says in page 184, in the fourth paragraph, he said, tulisan yang berharga ialah yang jujur, pendek dan terang, menurut mestinya, atau panjang tetapi ditulis dengan cara yang tidak membosankan, baik di medan tempat berpidato atau di medan bersurat khabar. He says that even for us who are thinking on the for society, we must also be moderate, right? Do not think or write in such a way that confuse people. And he talks about this in the next chapter, where he talks about being moderate when you are expressing your emotion. So that's the next level of moderation. So the first is moderation in terms of your aims and objectives, your niat. The second is moderation in terms of the way in which you think. Now the third is moderation in terms of your emotions. And emotions, orang Melayu kata kan, ikut hati mati, ikut nafsu lesu, ikut rasa binasa. And he is reminding us that in the age that we are in, our emotions are always being played around. The social media has made it worse. The social media affects our inner emotions as we view images, as we listen to certain talks and certain analyses. We become very, very affected. And it makes it worse, according to HAMKA, when people spin things around, the spin doctors. He says in page 187, meskipun in paragraph number 4, he says, meskipun tidak sedikit faedah bacaan kepada manusia, namun tidak sedikit pula jumlahnya yang sesat lantaran membaca. Banyak buku yang berisi tipuan. Bukan saja buku because in his time there was just books and newspapers and magazines. Now we have social media. Dan banyak pula yang hanya mengobar-ngobarkan rasa benci. So a lot of things that you see out there makes you hate people, makes you angry, makes you sometimes feel disgruntled, and also affects the ways in which you think. And everyone, according to him, is affected by this sickness of making people hate other people. And I would like again for everyone to read this book by this author. The book is published by MIT Press. This author's name is Lee McIntyre, and the title of the book is Post-Truth. I'm sure you all have heard this term before, post-truth. Post-truth means basically that truth in itself is already not found anymore or is no longer valid. Post-truth basically means anything can be the truth if people can argue about it well enough. Anything can be accepted as truth if that so-called manufactured truth is said or is presented in such a way that is convincing enough. And Lee McIntyre look at how fake news is now accepted as valid, is accepted as truth, and more importantly, he directs his analysis to politicians, especially in America, who use lies to make people believe in the things that they want to do, in the acts that destroy human beings for their personal objectives. And that's why HAMKA reminds us, when it comes to moderation in emotions, we must always manage our emotions by thinking independently. And in page 189, he talks about this. He go on paragraph number 6, he says, penulis yang merdeka fikiran harus tegak di muka di dalam masyarakat sebagai kedudukan penganjur-penganjur umat juga. Bermacam-macam usaha yang dilakukan untuk menyatakan fikiran dengan buku, dengan hikayat, dengan surat-surat khabar. So he says that one way for us to battle against this extremism in terms of emotions, and the people who stir people's emotions through their extreme views, and these people can be people who are powerful, who are in positions of power, and who can also be people in society, is that we become independent thinkers. Which means that when we think about all issues, we must practice what has been called as tabayyun. Tabayyun means to check the validity of the truth of something. Don't become people whom, when you see news about something that is happening, quickly react the news, quickly share the news, quickly like the news, quickly comment on the news. Rather, when you receive something that stirred your emotions, don't react first. Don't use your heart, use your head, and find out the validity of that thing. There are scholars who have been talking about this extensively, one of which is two American scholars, which I like very much. Noam Chomsky, for example, he says that the duties of intellectuals, of scholars, is to expose these lies. So our job is not only to find out the truth. Our job is also to expose lies. A lot of people out there are producing lies that results to people's emotions being affected. It is our duty as scholars and intellectuals and people who are learned to expose this. And to expose this, according to the Palestinian scholar Edward Said in his book, The Representations of Intellectuals, the role of scholars and intellectuals is to speak truth to power. We need to speak truth to untruth. We need to speak truth to expose lies. And sometimes speaking truth means you have to challenge the powers that be. And we talk about powers that be, sometimes it's the power of the media. The media produce a lot of lies, making people extreme in terms of their emotions. We need to bring people back to moderation. So that's the third part that he talks about. Now he goes into the everyday life. And this is the beautiful part of this chapter where he talks about sederhana keperluan hidup. Why we need to be moderate when it comes to our daily necessities. And as we have discussed before, this is a sickness of our society, where people tend to buy things and have things that they don't need. And he says in page 192, and this is so telling of our society right now, on paragraph number 5, where he says, dan kerap kali orang miskin mencuba hendak hidup seperti orang kaya. Sounds very familiar kan? Where you have a lot of people who are poor, they want to pretend to be like the rich. Gaji kecil, belanjanya lebih besar dan gajinya. Pendapatannya rendah, borosnya lebih tinggi dan modalnya. Tentu habis, sedangkan laut ditimba lagi kering. So he talks about people who in their daily lives, they are always overspending. And this is the problem. He goes on the next page, page 193, on the second paragraph. What does he call it? He call it penyakit. Penyakit ini ada pada zaman jajahan. Tetapi pada zaman merdeka, rupanya masih hebat. Kerana sisa jiwa rendah masih belum hilang. And this is the point I want to dilate and magnify here. He says people who are always overspending, buying things beyond their means, taking unnecessary bank loans. There are necessary bank loans that you need to take. Sometimes you need to study overseas and you cannot pay for it. Okay, taking bank loans even though it's not encouraged, and if you can find an Islamic bank to do it, that's even better, or an ethical financing firm. But there are many things that if you see in our society, we are buying things that we don't need. You buy a house, you need things for your house. Those are necessities. Buy things that you need, not buy things that you want. Buy things that are affordable, not buy things that you think is good for you because your neighbors have it. You want to keep up with the Joneses. And Hamka calls it jiwa rendah. People who do all these things, they may think that they look great. They may think that they look good. They may think that when their friends, their relatives come, oh wow, your house looks like the istana of Raja so and so. But actually he says these people, jiwa mereka jiwa yang rendah. They actually define themselves in relation to things. They don't define themselves in accordance to the knowledge that they have, in accordance to the character that they have. They don't define themselves in accordance to the goodness that they can give to people. It is things that define them. So it's funny, you know. My father used to say to me in a very powerful way, he says, kalau engkau berikan baju yang cantik kepada beruk, orang yang pakai itu tetap beruk. Kalau diberikan baju yang cantik kepada ular, yang pakai itu tetap ular. So the person doesn't change because their clothes cost them a few $1,000s, or their shoes or whatever. What makes you special, according to Hamka, is your ability to be a good person. And a good person is always moderate when it comes to spending. On page 195, he says, on the second paragraph, what is the way out of this? Sebaliknya adalah mencukupkan apa yang ada. Alternatively, the best way to live your lives is to make sure that what you need is enough. So go back to Alpert's book, The Good Enough Life. At the end of the day, the point of life is to have things that you need, not things that you want. Mengukur baju pada tubuh sendiri, tidak melebihi kekuatan yang dapat dipikul, jalan yang seaman-amannya menuju kesenangan hati, melapangkan fikiran untuk zaman yang akan datang. Orang yang telah biasa hidup sederhana tidak merasa canggung dan tidak takut akan terperosok kepada bebanan hutang dan menggelapkan, kerana diri tidak mementingkan kegagahan palsu, kemegahan terhadap orang berdekatan rumah. Ni he says what I said just now. You're not worried about what people say. One who is moderate in terms of his living, who knows his priority, and he talks about it in the last chapter, keutamaan. He's not afraid of what orang Melayu kita selalu kata, apa nanti orang akan cakap. Right? And we see this especially in marriages. Right? Malays, Muslims generally do very expensive and lavish marriages, weddings, right? And many of them take loans sometimes, either from relatives or even from the bank, to have that wedding when they cannot afford it. Why do they do it? If you ask them, apa nanti makcik kau akan kata? Apa nanti pakcik akan ni? Everything that we do, when we say that you are doing it because of what other people say, then problems will come mentally, spiritually, and the whole life. So there is a book by this Japanese author. I forgot the name of the author. It's a very beautiful book. The title of the book is The Courage to be Disliked. And I would encourage everybody to read it. It's basically a conversation between this man and a philosopher where they talk about why you shouldn't be afraid to be disliked by others. Now, that doesn't mean that you do things that make you become disliked, but rather, when you want to live your life as a principled person, as a moderate person, as someone who does things because they need that thing and because it can actually fulfill their fullest potential, you're not afraid of what people say. Because we cannot control what people say about us, but we can control what we do for ourselves. And this is what HAMKA is trying to say, that when we live our lives in moderation of the things that we need, we then gain control. When you gain control, that's where you become free. Free from what? Free from people's judgments. Because what they say, whether they throw bricks and stones, will not break your bones. You become stronger because you are doing things in a manner in which you want it. And that leads me to the next chapter where HAMKA says about being moderate in terms of happiness. Right? Sederhana dalam sukacita. So he says that when people are happy, that's when they become irrational. I want to repeat this. When people are happy, they sometimes, usually most of the time, become very irrational and become very extreme. And this is what we call as extreme happiness. And that's why Rasulullah SAW always remind us, do not be extremely happy and do not laugh too much. Sometimes you are so happy, something makes you, tickles you, and you laugh and laugh and laugh. There are people who die, actually get a heart attack because they laugh too much. They did some scientific research, psychology, where they actually brain scan someone who is laughing, and they found that someone who laughs hard, the brain actually shakes so hard. And you know that the brain is actually a small jelly that is covered by a cage of your skull, right? And when you laugh too much, actually you can result to a lot of problems, not only neurologically, but also to your heart. So be careful of people who laugh too much. But HAMKA is saying here that when we are happy, do not be extremely happy. Why? Because when people are happy, sometimes they forget that their happiness can actually make them do things that are excessive. So for example, I'm very happy that my daughter is going to get married very, very soon. I'm very happy that my another daughter just graduated from the university. And because I'm so happy, I'm going to bring everyone to Japan on a business class ticket and stay in a 6-star hostel there for a whole month because we are so happy. And when I do that, I come back, I'm happy doing that, but all of my funds now are gone because of that happiness. So even in happiness, we need to be careful. In page 201, he says, sangat disayangkan kesederhanaan itulah, in the third paragraph, sekarang yang dilupakan orang. So to be moderate in happiness is something that people always forget. Padahal itulah pokok pangkal kesenangan hati. Orang kota diperdayakan dengan kemegahan dan kemewahan, sehingga sebahagian besar hendak melebihi kekuatannya. So he talks about the people living in the cities. They are so happy that they are now very successful. Unlike the people who are in the villages, we now have progress. We now have success. So they spend too much. Orang-orang yang insaf memuji kesenangan dan kesederhanaan orang kampung. Tetapi rupanya orang kampung itu pun tidak seperti dahulu lagi. Mereka pun mulai pula hendak meniru mewah orang kota. And this is the other problem. People who are living even in the kampung, they become people who no longer become moderate in spending, in their happiness, and because of that, they also become pulled into this whole idea that happiness is a justification of doing things that sometimes exceed the limits of not only your life but also religion. So you see this in many festive occasions, termasuk Hari Raya juga, we are very happy, but because we are so happy, solat tertinggal, satu. Because we are so happy, the hijab between men and women, we don't take care anymore. Laugh, terpegang-pegang and all this kind of stuff, we forget. So be careful. When you are happy, be moderate. And more importantly, he says that people who are happy are people who do not define themselves only by what is material. So go back to the last chapter again. He says on page 203, kesenangan hati tidak dapat dihargai dengan uang, tidak dapat dibeli dan tidak dapat dijual, kerana dia adalah hasil yang dikutip daripada suatu ladang yang orang tahu di mana tumpak ladang itu. So he says that when you are happy, be careful, and when you are happy, make sure that your happiness translates into the happiness of other people as well. Don't become so happy and then do things that only pursue your own happiness, such that the happiness of others is affected. So I just want to say that there was a study that was done in the US about happiness. This is what we call the science. Now the discipline is called the discipline of happiness studies. They found that the people who are most happy are the people who are generous to other people. These are the people who are the most happiest in life. You look at Bill Gates, he gives 90% of his wealth to charity, to philanthropy, and to things that help in medical advances. So they found that in the studies that people who give to other people the little that they have, they usually are the happiest people because they then surround themselves with people who share their happiness. And this is a reminder for us. Be around happy people and people who want to move towards happiness. Not people who want to move and who are emotional and are only centered around looking for positions, power and materialism. If you are around these people, unless you are like them, someday you will be unhappy. But if you surround yourself around people who are generous, people who want happiness for other people, you will live a happy life. And that brings us again to materialism. So he dedicates one whole chapter, sederhana kepada harta benda. So I mentioned just now about the problem of materialism as it being penyakit, and he even blames on page 205 the ulama of his time. He says penyakit yang orang itu keterlaluan kepada harta benda ada di kalangan ulama-ulama. He says in paragraph number 4, penyakit ini sangat cepat menularnya. Ulama-ulama agama sendiri tidak terlepas daripada penyakit ini. Perbuatan yang menguntungkan umat boleh menjadi haram hukumnya. So funny, he says that during his time, the ulama during his time, because they want materialism for themselves, because they want position for themselves, what is haram? They say it is to be what is good for the ummah, the maslahah of the ummah, they say it's haram. Don't do these things. Kalau tidak ada keuntungan untuk dirinya, in order for it to be useful for themselves, they say it's haram for the ummah. And he says that many during his time, and he gives the example of Turkey, where the ulama memfatwakan bahawa haram menjadi halal, that anything that is done by Mustafa Kemal, the secularist, is something that is acceptable. So he says that this is a character of people who thinks that their wealth is everything for them. So he goes on and on in this chapter to talk about the problem of tamak. What's the meaning of tamak? Tamak basically people who sees that their lives are to be surrounded by wealth. Everything for them is about the pursuit of wealth. And he says in page 211, in order for us to be moderate, in the last paragraph, he says, harta benda boleh dijadikan jambatan. So, be careful, he says. There are people who strive to get wealth and do everything to get that wealth. Even killing other people, even giving wrong fatwas, even giving wrong opinions, even telling lies, spreading fake news, and so forth and so forth. But he is also qualifying it by saying that wealth is not a bad thing. And I said it before, that wealth is not, or money is not the root of evil. And this is a wrong maxim. In Islam, we do not accept that adage. Right? Even though it's an old age adage, money is not the root of evil in Islam. Money is a magnifier of good. The more money that you have, the more good you can do to others. And Hamka says this. He says, harta benda, in page 211, last paragraph, harta benda boleh dijadikan jambatan atau titian. It can become a bridge untuk mencapai yang dimaksudkan. So go back to niat. Apa yang dimaksudkan ialah kebaikan. Dengan harta benda banyak maksud manusia tercapai dan kehendak berlaku. Dengan benda, orang boleh bertukar keperluan dan kepentingan. Hanya sekianlah tujuan harta itu sehingga telah mempengaruhi akal dan fikiran. So he says that the pursuit of harta is not wrong. Kalau kita sederhana, if we are moderate. But when we get into excessiveness, which many people do, the pursuit of wealth becomes something that brings about other problems because we tend to lie, cheat, and do other things that come with it. That leads then to the issue of sederhana di dalam mencari nama. Now, during his time, everybody wants popularity. Now we call it celebrification. People who wants to be celebrities. Everybody wants to be instant celebrities. How do they do it? Everybody goes into TikTok, dance in the MRT station, upload it, 700,000 likes, 50,000 sharing, and they become instant celebrities. Hamka says this is actually an excessive behavior. People who have bring themselves into extremism, so much so that they actually downgrade themselves. Right? وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. I mentioned this before, that Allah has created the human being as the most noblest of being. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We are the best of creation. But because some people, they want names, they do things like this that are silly in order to become known to people. And he says about these people in page 219, he says, orang seperti itu, in second paragraph, akan mengerjakan pekerjaannya hanya semata-mata kerana pekerjaan itu dipandangnya kewajipan dan semata-mata mengharapkan keredaan Allah dan keredaan hatinya sendiri. People who don't hunt for popularity, for celebrity status, to become influencers, to become known in public, they won't do these things. They do things out of sincerity, ikhlas. They do things because they know Allah wants them to do it. They don't get swayed by what society does and try to please society in the things that they do. Rather, they do things because they want to change society and to change themselves, and more importantly, whether they are known or not, they are not concerned. And this is the point that Hamka is trying to make. But he says on the reverse, people who are not moderate, on page 222, the last paragraph, they become orang yang diperdayakan oleh nafsu, mencari nama dan kemasyhuran, adalah orang yang menipu diri sendiri. Mula-mulanya ditipunya orang lain, sesudah itu dibanggakannya dirinya sehingga dia lupa menyelidiki hakikat yang sebenarnya pada dirinya, celanya dan aibnya. So this is where when people hunt for celebrity status, the same is it with people who hunt for power, they will end up becoming people who always want to upload things for the sake of uploading it, in order for them to be known. So there is, I do not know much about how social media works, but what I know is what they call as having a lot of content. And some people, they have lots and lots of content. A lot of it are actually nonsensical content because they want to remain known. And that also becomes a form of sickness. Because for some people, when they lose their so-called celebrity status, they become very, very stressed. And you have a lot of these problems now. People whom, when they are so-called unliked, right, in social media, or people comment on their page negatively, they become very, very affected because in them, what's most important is to be known by other people. So people like this, whenever they are criticized, they become very down because at the end of the day, it's about their image that they are trying to protect, not the change that they are trying to effect in society. It's all about themselves, right? So he goes on in that chapter to talk about this. He says in page 2 to 5, and this is, he goes at length actually on sederhana dalam mencari nama, because he says that this is a big thing even amongst common people. And now he talks about, again, weddings. On page 2 to 5, in the second paragraph, he said, upacara perkahwinan merupakan pesta besar. Orang yang penghasilan hidupnya 100 hendak memperlihatkan kepada orang lain. Dia sanggup mengadakan pesta 200 melebihi pendapatannya. Orang yang 200 hendak memperlihatkan diri sanggup 300 dan seterusnya. Untuk memperlihatkan. So he repeats the word memperlihat. Just because they want to be seen. They want to have the name. Oh, wah, perkahwinan kau ni betul-betul gah. Maknanya orang kau ni orang yang ternama. Tidak beremas bungkal di asah. Tidak berkayu tangga di tanggik. Perlu menggadai. So he says, these people who look like they have names, who look like they are celebrated, actually they always pawn their stuff. Perlu meminjam. Perlu pergi kepada tukang menternak wang sehingga tidak lepas belenggu hutang. Bertahun, berpuluh tahun, bahkan sampai masuk kubur, tidak mengapa. Asar terbayar malu yang sekali itu. So, because they want name, they can do something extreme such that they become poor, papa kedana, in order for people to celebrate them for being somebody who is special. So, that's being moderate when it comes to looking for names. And then of course, last but not least, he talks about being moderate when it comes to looking for position. Sederhana mencari pangkat. Now, during his time, during Hamka's time, it was after the Indonesian Revolution, where everyone now feel that they are free from Dutch colonization. But it was also a difficult time in Indonesia because everybody was seeking for power and position. And Hamka was in the face of these people who were crazy about power. So he reminds us that in our lives, there will come a time where we love pangkat, where we love positions. And positions, while it is good, can also be something that takes away character from us. On page 232, he says, in the second paragraph, kalau orang sedar apa ertinya kekuasaan di negara demokrasi, tentu orang itu tak akan berebut-rebut mengejar pangkat. Tetapi berusaha mempersiapkan diri, mengisi diri sendiri sehingga berhak menjadi bangsa yang merdeka. Pangkat bagi bangsa merdeka adalah kewajipan dan kepercayaan. Kewajipan yang dipikul orang banyak kerana mereka percaya bahawa kita sanggup memikul tanggungjawab. So when you think that positions is something that you should strive for, Hamka is saying that with positions come responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. That positions, while we seek for it, we should not be extreme in seeking for it, because once it is given to you, you will realize that you are given a lot of responsibilities, and that responsibility means that you will be questioned. That's why Rasulullah says, kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun ala ra'iyatin. Right? So all of you are leaders, but all of you are answerable to the people that you are leading. So be careful, because positions come with it responsibilities. Don't seek positions beyond what is necessary, and don't be crazy about positions. That ends basically the points that he wants to make in the chapter. But he basically concludes with this big thing, that moderation is not something that we can develop so easily. Moderation needs to be inculcated and taught. And that's why he ends the chapter with what he calls as didikan kesederhanaan. Moderation has to be imbibed, inculcated, and educated in us. It has to be done when the person is young, and of course when the person has already grown up or elderly. It can be taught through reminders. So kita selalu harus ingat memperingati. Watawasau bis sabri, watawasau bil marhamah, in surah Al-Balad. Allah reminds us. Always remind people. Orang nak buat majlis perkahwinan besar-besaran, kita ingatkan kepada dia, cik, tak perlu kita buat besar-besaran, kerana lepas orang tu bernikah nanti dia nak kena beli rumah BTO sekarang mahal. Kita berikan peringatan yang baik, berikan peringatan dengan cara yang sayang menyayangi. Jangan kita berikan peringatan dengan cara yang kita menjatuhkan martabat orang itu. So we must always remind people on being moderate. On page 239, in the 4th paragraph, he goes on to say, maksud pendidikan yang terutama ialah menciptakan anak-anak yang di belakang hari merasa erti kemerdekaan. Now, this is the most important thing. He says that one needs to see the value of independence for them to see the value of being moderate. Because a person who values independence will not be extreme. Why does he say this? Because if you value your independence, you will not borrow from the bank. Because once you are on credit, Malcolm X says, the first step to slavery is credit. Simple. The first step to slavery is credit. Because when you borrow from banks, the banks will be asking back for the money. If you cannot pay it, you can go bankrupt, and so forth and so forth. So he says, barang siapa yang menginginkan anak-anaknya menjadi orang yang merdeka, that is independent, hendaklah dididik dalam kesederhanaan. Sederhana di dalam hidupnya sehari-hari, ajar bersakit-sakit dahulu, bersenang-senang kemudian. So one who is independent, they will live very simple lives in the beginning. They will search for things that are necessary. They will do things that would ensure that their minds, their hearts, their souls, their lives are taken care of. And in moving this line of moderation, he says, sederhana di dalam hidupnya sehari-hari, ajar bersakit supaya mudah menyesuaikan diri dengan keadaan yang ada sekelilingannya nanti. Jangan sampai dia merasa canggung dan memberati orang lain. One who values moderation, who knows the importance of independence, they will not become a liability for others because they know what to do for themselves. And he ends the chapter to say, be moderate when it comes to spending. Don't be spendthrift. He starts that on page 240 until 241. Be moderate when you speak. Do not be treacherous towards others. Keep secrets and be careful of your tongue. Be moderate when you do work. Don't overwork. Work when you need to finish it and then take rest, he says. And don't be brutal to others at work. Be moderate in being happy. Be moderate when you are sad, because don't be too sad, because someday happiness will come. Be moderate when it comes to your health. Don't eat too much. Don't exercise, over-exercise. We have now a problem of over-exercising. And last but not least, he ends by saying, sebab itu, maka kesederhana adalah keperluan hidup orang, tua dan muda, lelaki dan perempuan, dan itu pula harus dididikkan kepada anak-anak. So a very beautiful chapter on moderation, where all of us need to be concerned with, because when we are not moderate, when we are extreme, we bring ourselves into the path of destruction. And moderation means that we are moderate in all aspects of life, be it how we think, be it how we speak, be it how we feel, be it how we do our work, be it our aims in life, and be it whether we are happy or sad, and in our interactions with people around us. Take care of ourselves and be moderate in everything that we do in life. Aqulu qawli hadza wa astaghfirullahal azim li wa lakum. We'll end today's session and we'll continue next week in another chapter of the beautiful book Falsafah Hidup. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.